friends. This is a couple items from my late father's personal hobby. He was born ooh, sometime in the early 30s, mid 30s. Served in Korea when he was a young man, so you figure do your math there, figure out how old he was at that time. Died about 10 years ago. He was always a car buff and had, well, a lot of miscellaneous things and quite a few brochures. He was always sending away for brochures for his favorite car types and designs back when they were worth having, and he had them up, and he had stuff from the 50s through the 80s, and there was quite a bit of it. And a lot of it, like I said, my sister or others, they either ended up in the trash or they disappeared or got destroyed. And I was able to fish out some, and some of them I have kept for personal reasons. The rest of them we've decided that anything within a hobby, you always want, in my opinion, to see other people enjoy it too. And at some point, whether your hobby becomes too much, or you get to an age where you just can't enjoy it anymore, or you don't, and it's time to consider passing it on. And in this case, or in some cases, you can literally give them away or donate them to other people who are big in the hobby. That's fine, or to an institution that may have find value in them for their purpose. And in some cases, you can sell them on eBay, and there is nothing wrong with doing this, right? They were collected and enjoyed for many, many years, and just giving them back to the society to continue that is a good thing, right? And in this case, I have several different ones that they happen to be tucked down here under the table in a storage basket. And I pulled a book out last week for some other purpose, and these fell out of the basket, and I forgot that they were in there. I have another tote out in the garage that has a bunch of other items, perhaps some of these or some similar to them, still yet to go through, and some stuff on my dad's out there that it just wasn't time to go through everything after my mom passed away, and we had to make decisions, hard decisions. And if you've ever had to deal with an estate, you'll understand what I mean. And some of the stuff, like I said, some was given away, some was taken, some ended up in a big dumpster out in the driveway. In this case, a couple of the boxes ended up in my storage locker when my wife and I were moving stuff we wanted to keep in our own personal effects off my mom's property. Anyway, so we have the Model Ford completely illustrated description instructions for care and maintenance of the Model Ford automobile and Model A trucks, published by Lloyd Clymer of Los Angeles. At the time, this cost $1. It's actually in fairly good shape. It's not perfect. There's a little bit of issues in the corners and things like this. My father, maybe a pencil accidentally scribbled some stuff on there, a little bit of marking and things. I just looked these up on eBay, and they run between $15 and $20. That's the going rate of the two I saw, and I didn't see a slew of them. So, I mean, I know that they were mass produced, and there was quite a few, but who knows, right? This here was about the same price. And in this case, it says here, notice this is a reprint. This is not the original, because it says that this book, originally published in 1928 when the Model A Ford was popular, has been reprinted as a result of public demand. Still thousands of Model A, because the original come in a cloth-bound cover, and at least from what I can tell, the advertisement for the new Ford Model A, giving it selling points in this detail, trying to convince you to buy it. Then we got details of the Model A chassis, Ford A bodies, nice blueprints. Ford Model A engine. From an artistic standpoint, I went to school to be an automotive diesel mechanic back when I was 18, and discovered that I didn't want to be a mechanic, and I never made use of it. In the year 2000, the company I worked for shut its doors, and I had an opportunity, and I went to college, and I got an Associate of Applied Sciences degree for computer-aided design. basically rendering blueprints and parts and things like this. And I look at this and realize this was all hand drawn back in the day. They didn't have this excruciating detail that they were able to do without the computer. Just shows you how much humanity's capable of doing, even with what we would consider subpar mechanic or subpar technology today, and how much more we can possibly do down the road. Is just, it just boggles the mind, right? So details of lubrication and cooling systems, carburation ignition systems, more cooling system, fuel system, carburetor installation, electrical system for the motor, how simple these motors and things were, and how complicated and complex and crazy expensive our stuff is today. Would it even be possible to make the equivalent of a Ford Model T or a Model A today, a everyman's car that was, can you imagine them coming out with a car that only costs $3,000 or $4,000 that anybody could afford? Pretty much the monthly payments on that on 5 years would be $100 a month, right? And that the simplicity of the engine and the motors and the transmission and everything is kept at that simplicity, so it's easy to repair and maintain and cheaply done. Of course, they're not going to do that. When was the last time you went out and priced a car, or even worse, a pickup? I know people who drive trucks that cost almost as much as my house. A guy that we know went out and bought a new pickup, was almost 50 grand. We pay 82 for the house. You know, his truck payment costs as much as my mortgage, and all he has, he has a 5 or 6 year window to pay his truck off. I can't afford to do that. I have a nice little used van, and it costs me $120 a month to pay for it for 5 years. So I'm just saying, right? Transmission system and brakes, Model T transmission system, manual. Yeah, that's another thing that is an interesting thing. My employer struggles to find people who can drive a manual transmission. Our commercial truck that we use and several of our smaller trucks that we use are manual transmission, and he has had gobs of repairs, transmission and clutches that had to be replaced because most people today do not know how to drive them. I was one of those generations. When I was in high school, when I was 16, or actually 15, going on 16, and before I got my license, I had to take driver's ed in school, and I took my education in the last automatic or manual that the school bought for that program. It was a 70, some kind of 70 Oldsmobile, I think it was, and it had a 3-speed on the column, and it was something you had to learn how to do. And I grew up on a farm. We learned how to drive tractors and other things that were gear driven, and yet we have loads of people. We're currently looking for a replacement commercial truck, and he insists on it having an automatic because it just solves a lot of problems. Just kind of interesting, right? Steering column or rear axle? No, that's steering. There's the rear axle. Frame and shock absorber, such that the shock absorber was at the time. Tires. My father worked for 30 years for Firestone, just a block up the street from where I live, making truck tires and tractor tires at this particular facility. Ford Model A truck model is a new Ford Liner rated at 1.5 tons with single wheels and 2.5 tons with dual rear wheels, 4-wheel brakes and worm driver axles, torque tube drive, and cantilever rear brake springs, and welded steel spoke wheels are used on both models. Interesting. Auxiliary 2-speed transmission. Here is our layout for our instrument panel and all of our gears. Imagine my grandfather, or my great grandfather drove one of these things, and I imagine one of your greats also drove one of these things because they're so iconic and they were such a big thing when they came out. We honestly cannot put ourselves in that spot. Our generation and the generations that follow us do not understand the concept of a world without an automobile. Ironically, my generation understands a world without cell phones, and yet we are glued to our cell phones. I cannot tell you how many times we're glued to them, and our world cannot operate. In such a short few decades, we went from everybody having a phone in your house to having almost nobody. Nobody I know still. No, I know one person, my wife's aunt and uncle, who still have a landline in their house. Most of them, you drive around town in the little green boxes where the landlines were for the block or two would focus in on. A lot of those are beat up or broken or knocked down now. People have vandalized them. Operating your Model A car, filling the radiator, filling the gas tank, proper oil level, starting engine. Be sure the gear shift lever is a neutral position in which it can move freely from side to side as in any standard gear shift. Trust me, that's important. Have you ever tried to start a manual vehicle while it was in gear? Right? Or put it in gear, take off the clutch at the wrong point, your truck or car is bucking all over the place, and it's not healthy on any of it, including you. Anti-theft proof lock, starting the engine. Here's the schematics. Starting the car. In the day, you just get in your car and you just start it. Starting car, release the handbrake lever. With the engine running, disengage the clutch by pushing down the left foot pedal. Move the gear lever, shift lever to the left and back, which is the low speed position as shown in insert figure 18. Gradual release pressure on the clutch pedal, i.e. don't let off the clutch like you're letting off your brake, which is a slow speed position is slow in. Gradual release pressure on the clutch, same climb, increase the speed of the engine by pressing slightly on the accelerator second. When the car has reached a speed of 5 to 8 miles an hour, engage the second or intermediate speed as follows. Alright. Important to know, shifting back to low speed, into low speed, descending a hill, stopping the car. If you stop on a hill, do not leave the car in neutral. This is one of the reasons you're always supposed to turn your wheels into a curb, or so that your car rolls back, it'll roll into the curb, or rolls into the curb, not into traffic. Well, I guess that depends on which part of the world you're in, which direction. Do not rest your foot on a clutch pedal. Do not make a practice of resting your foot on the clutch pedal while driving, if this may cause the clutch to slip and unnecessary wear facing on the disc. This is called riding the clutch. It causes premature clutch trouble in any car. Yep. Back in the day when you needed to check your battery every few weeks, make sure it had water in it. Self-contained batteries in cars today, we take them for granted. I've got a Lumina where the battery sits underneath the front and it sits beneath the windshield wiper fluid reservoir and a metal fairing that goes across the front of the motor. So if you needed to jump start the thing or get the battery out, you have to dismantle part of your front end of the car to get it out. You couldn't do that with batteries back then. Air cooling system, Ford lubricating system, draining the oil pan, lubricating a transmission, a lot of stuff that we don't do ourselves anymore. My dad's generation was big on that because it would save money, and they were easy to do, or fairly easy to do. And some of the stuff now is so complicated. You can still change your oil. You can charge your air conditioning unit. It's actually fairly simple, but there's a lot of things in your electronic system you can't fix yourself, or you can't without having some working knowledge. The average Joe does not have that knowledge anymore. We've gained technology and lost and new knowledge, and then lost knowledge in the process. Plus, there's such a thing as value of time. There was some people love to work on and tinker with vehicles, and that's a hobby or an interest, and you know this. But a lot of people have pretty hectic lives or have very full lives and just don't have the time to spend 5 hours on a weekend tweaking and doing general maintenance on a vehicle every weekend like you would have back in the day. And it wasn't all that indifferent back when they started coming out with these cars, when people still had horse and buggies and wagons. Well, if you had horses, you still took care of the horses. You had to feed them, you had to maintenance on them all the time, or they didn't survive very long. So anyway, looking at differential, very few people today even know what a differential is, let alone how to change the oil in one and when you should. Greasing the car, something you wanted to do on a regular basis. One of those life lessons I learned, and I'm sure all of you've learned it: change the oil in your car on a regular basis. Periodically, it needs replaced. If you even go longer than what it says to do, you still don't want to go for years without doing so. It's very bad on the motor. And I know that a lot of the older vehicles that are still around today and in good shape is because the people, A, took care of them, B, changed the oil. Change that oil. And if you're in doubt, every 4 months is not a bad. I don't care. You can go Google all kinds of professionals to tell you all that stuff. Cooling the engine, adjusting the fan belt, things we didn't have to worry about these days. Care radiator in the winter, fuel system, the carburetor. It was the first time when you were a teenager and you didn't, your dad or mom didn't run out and check the radiator water, make sure in your car that it was appropriately at the right percentage. Because I had to do things like that the hard way because my dad believed in that. And I remember one car had a 70 Nova that one of the block plug, the freeze plugs on the block popped out. This looks like an inverted cap, and that made for a bad day. And the hard part was getting my big hand down behind the firewall so I could put a new cap in, and then somehow tapping it in there. My grandfather, who was a mechanic and a preacher for most of his life, had a lot of tricks and things like that. He was also a big believer in letting you fail before giving you some assistance in that case. And he wouldn't be, well, do you know if you did this and this kind of thing. And of course he had some specialty tools that he had crafted himself or got acquired for working on older vehicles that we have no value for them now other than as collector items. Electrical system, Model A car, ignition timing. When was the last time you set the timing on your car or even checked it? I mean, I haven't timed a car in 30 years. I'm just being truthful. I don't think the last time I worked on a motor in any vehicle I owned was in my 20s, and at that point I decided, I'm buying used vehicles most of my life anyway, and back then I bought really cheap ones, so when something significantly bad went down, I got rid of it and bought another one. Something I didn't have to do a lot of work on. I did do quite a bit up until that point, and once again learned that I have no patience for working on vehicles and no desire. Or if you're lucky, you've got somebody in your family who loves this sort of thing and will take care of it. But how many people today can sit there and tell you how to set the timing for your motor, and even tell you what the timing means in your motor, right? General motor adjustments, grease generator charging rate, remove the generator cover, loosen the field brush holder, lock screw the field brush. You never do that with a generator. Even when I was a teenager, I just don't take the generator apart. It was the alternators, right? The alternator goes bad, you took it off, you took it to the parts store. A lot of times you would get aftermarket with lifetime. I always got the ones with a lifetime warranty. It only cost an extra $1 or $2. And the irony was, even they understood that even a lifetime could be a year. And if once again on that 70 Nova, I went through brake cylinders quite a lot for a number of reasons, and doing brake stands and spinning your tires just to impress everybody will burn. Well, it's hard on your brakes. And so I bought one with a lifetime warranty on it, and I went through 4 of them, and I only bought the first one. After that, it was just a matter of taking the old one out and taking it in, exchanging it for a new one, putting it in, then getting help with the brake lines bled. Once again, another skill that I have not used in 30 years, 25 years. It's just cheaper, or in my mind, more. It's just better for me to take it to somebody who wants to do that stuff and pay them. And if you don't have a good backyard mechanic, get a good regular mechanic. I'm just saying. All right. Focusing on lining your headlights. When was the last time you had to line the headlights on a car? Anybody? More than happy to hear about some comments and stories. Put them in the comments below. I have had to do this a number of times in recent years because the commercial truck I drive is a POS, and it's just disintegrating. It's a 2004 Nissan 2300, and it literally is falling apart. There's the body pieces of it. All the headlights now are held in by those tie straps, right? Because otherwise they just jiggle and bubble around, and there's no the alignments and stuff, and then the shot. There's no getting them aligned. I tried. You just be glad I got working headlights now. I actually got the other one of them broke for 6 months. They finally got it fixed. We're talking about tires, a whole nother set of things. All right, a lot of stuff on these tires. Even when I was a kid, I did a lot of stuff on tires we don't do today. We just take it to a tire shop. Somebody else did that just a couple weeks ago. Had a flat tire on my spare car on the Lumina, and took the tire off and took it to the tire store and put it in. Well, they didn't have any used ones that would fit, so it cost $98. Right? Jeez. Brakes. I've done some brake work in the past. We're back to that patience. Patience. If you know what you're doing and you got the right tools, and you enjoy doing it, it's not a thing. It's not a chore. But some things are easier with two sets of hands than one. Replenishing with oil, proper way to wash a car. Come on, right? Here's instructions on. Always use cold or lukewarm water, never hot water. If a hose is used, don't turn the water on at full force. This drives the dirt into the finish. After surplus mud and grime have been washed off, take a sponge and clean the body and running gear with a solution of water and linseed oil soap. Rinse off the cold water, then rub and polish the body with a damp chamois. The body polish is good in quality. You may be used to add luster to the car. Grease on the running gear may be removed with a gasoline soaked sponge or rag. The nickel parts may be polished with good nickel polish. An excellent body polish. Nickel polish can be purchased from any Ford dealer. Should the body or other epoxine finished parts of the car become splattered with tar or other substances used on the roads, spots can be removed with a solution of 2/3 gasoline, 1/3 oil. If full strength gasoline is used, there is a possibility of softening the finish. Dip a soft cloth into the mixture and using one finger rub the spot gently until it's been removed. Rust spot should then be washed off with clear water. Care for the top, storing the car. How many of us just leave our cars outside? I do. I mean, I have a garage, but it's too small. I could get the Lumina in, but getting in and out would be a problem. And we use our garage as a work room for doing other projects, so it just isn't big enough. And so the car and our van stay outside year round. So my dad had a huge garage. He was a big believer, but for years he left his cars out. And I've seen cars, you've seen them, over time the paint fades, they get, the chrome gets less shiny, etc., etc. You won't worry about talking about it. Ford Model 1.5 ton truck. So we got a little information on the Model A version of the truck. Summary of Ford Model A engine troubles and their causes. Starter turns the engine over freely. Check the following: ignition is off, gasoline is empty, or the supply is shut off. See, how often do you have to worry about turning the gas valve on to your gas tank? Right, one of those extra steps we don't deal with. Engine is cold, mixture may not be rich enough, choke button is not pulled back. How many times you had to use a choke? We had a couple vehicles that my employer has that has chokes. My work truck does not have one, and I've had one or two in the past when I was younger, but you don't see them now. Warm engine over choking, breaker points too close, correct adjustment. Yeah, when was the last time you set the points in your car? You know what those are? even have them. You know, a lot of more modern cars don't they have the, I don't think they have points anymore. They have electronic gizmos instead. Water and sediment, starter fails, turn the engine over, missing at low speed, missing at high speed, engine stops suddenly. Well, the gasoline tank's empty. Could be dirt in the liner carburetor, or the gas mixture is too lean. Good to know. That's a lot of stuff that they didn't know back then. They had to learn, and now we take it for granted. Engine knocks. Manuals, more manuals. There you go. An interesting little booklet.